Hello everyone, welcome back. So what are we going to discuss today? Okay, as a part of Java 8, there are a lot of new functionality came into the picture, right? So one of the major important thing is functional interface. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what is functional interface. We have a traditional interface which will contain method declaration, right? But what is the difference here? Okay, let's talk about there are three major points in a functional interface. Okay, so the first thing, the functional interface, it holds only one single abstract method. You cannot have a multiple abstract method. If you have a multiple abstract method, that cannot be a functional interface. Okay, and as a new addition, we can write your own methods, but it has to be a default method. You can provide implementation. You can write a method and you can provide some implementation. And there is another method called static method. Okay, so static method also you can provide the implementation. So basically one abstract method, you can have a multiple methods, but it has to be a default method or a static method. But what is the difference between all of them? Single abstract method, you have to provide the implementation when you're trying to implement the particular interface. But default method, it is not necessary you need to provide the implementation. You can use the same implementation or you can override the previous implementation. And static method, we all know that static method, it cannot be overridden. It has to be remains the same. Okay, so I'm gonna show you simple example, how the real-time example, how it is looks like. For example, let's take a house. Okay, so house is a class in our scenario. Okay, and I have a owner method. So the first method is a owner, and there is a second method called tenant, and there is a third method which is a payment. Okay, so what are all these? Home is a interface, right? So my owner is going to be my abstract class. It can be overridden. Okay, so and my tenant, it's a default method. The tenant can be changed each and every time, right? So you can modify or you can provide different implementation for that. And there's another thing called payment. So it's a static method. Whether the tenants are changed or owners changed, but the payment has to be done. If it is a owner, you have to pay the house. When you're trying to get the new house, right, you have to pay for it. If it is a tenant, you have to pay monthly rental. Okay, let's try to implement the same in a simple program. Okay, let's do that. Let's open the Eclipse IDE here. Okay, let's create a new class. For example, let's create a class called house implementation. House implementation. And we need to have a main method, right? Let's have a main method in it. Okay, so let's write it. Before we are proceeding everything, let's start write a interface first. Okay, so what is our interface? It's a house is our interface, right? So interface, and my interface name is going to be house, and it has three methods in it. First one is void owner method. It can be overridden, right? And second, default method, which is the rent method, right? So we need to write a method which contains a default. One second. So default, and it's going to return a string, and my method name is going to be rent method. Okay, let's pass a input here. So let's take it's taking a string input parameter, right? Okay, it has returned something, right? So return, let's say house rented to Mr. Swanso. So let's add the data here. So this is a default method. Okay. So what is the next method? We mentioned the static method, right? Let's write a static method here. Static, and it again is going to be written a string, and it can be rent or payment. You can call them as a payment method, which will looking for double as the input. So which is not amount. So which will return. So rent amount is going to be rent amount has to be paid. So what is the rent amount here? Amount, right? So rent amount, let's provide something here. So this is the rent or amount I need to pay as a rental, right? Rent amount. Good. So we got all the methods in place. And do we need to provide functional interface here? You can provide functional interface. See, basically it is an optional method because when you have only one abstract method, by default it's considered as a functional interface. Okay. So let's try to create another method here. So owner method 1. See what has happened? This is not the signature of the functional interface. We'll get an error. So functional interface annotation, house is not a functional interface. So what we need to do? Just make sure we'll have only one abstract method in your interface. Okay. So let's try to implement the house. Okay. So when you implement the house, immediately there will be an error message pop up. So what is that? So it is saying like you need to implement the unimplemented methods. Okay, let's do that. Just click that. See, now you have the owner method. This is the only method which is implemented because we have two other methods also. Rent method, which can be overridden. It is an optional step. That is why when you're implementing it, it's not enabling it by default. Okay, so you have to, if you want to override, you need to do it manually. Okay, and there is another thing called payment, which is static method, which cannot be overridden. Okay, so let me put some sys here. Let me provide some. I'm the owner of the house. So okay, I am the owner of the house. Cool. Okay, so now pretty good, right? Okay, so let's create a object for that. So I'm going to create a object for house implementation and test is equal to new house implementation. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to call the owner method. Okay, let's run the method and we'll see what is the outcome of it. Okay, so this method has to be called, right? What's happening here? Okay, just right click and run as a Java application. So we can see the output here, right? So one second, let me keep it in the bottom here. Okay, so now we got the outcome, right? So what is the next step? Okay, so we verified the owner method can be overridden. The same time we have another method called rent method, right? You can call the rent method or you can override the rent method. Okay, so what for now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste and I'm going to override it here. Okay, so I need to provide rent method. So house rented, and this is the overridden class. We can simply say this is the overridden class. Okay, so I'm not printing anything here. I'm just keeping it for now. So or else can provide something. You can provide the S here also. Okay. So now what will happen? So I return the same method here. So I try to implement the house and I provide the implementation for owner method and I overridden the rent method which is existing in my interface. Okay. So let's call the method test dot rent method and we need to pass some data. So we can call them as test. So now what will happen? Just run the method. Okay, so why it's not printing? Because I need to print the data, right, from the outcome. So now Run it again. See, now we got this is the overridden class test, right? Okay, cool. So there is another method which is a string, I mean a static method. We know that static method cannot be overridden. So we need to call the method using the interface. So how we can do that? So we cannot call the method with the help of test. Okay, we need to use the class name, which is I mean the interface. So the house dot payment, and what is the payment amount? 1500, something like that. So let me put it in as ISO here. So now we got all the three methods executed. Okay, let's run the method and we'll see. See, I'm the owner of the house and this is my overridden class. So the first two steps, I mean first two methods which can be overridden, and the rent amount, this cannot be overridden since it is a static method. Okay, so the same thing we can call with the help of lambda expression also, which we will discuss in the later video. Thank you.